Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question is, can I analyze the case of Philip Polkinghorne? Just a reminder, I'm not diagnosing anybody in this video, only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and consider supporting me on Patreon. I will put the link to Patreon in the description for this video. First, I'll look at the background of this case, move to the timeline of the incident, then offer my analysis. Philip Polkinghorne was born in the early 1950s and lived in New Zealand. He worked as an eye surgeon and had 3 sons. Later, Philip married a woman named Pauline K. Hanna. After earning her master's degree in business administration, Pauline had a variety of jobs, including as a health administrator. She helped to manage the distribution of the COVID-19 vaccine in Auckland. The couple lived in a house on Upland Road in a wealthy neighborhood of Auckland called Remuera. Their $10 million net worth allowed them to engage in a life of luxury. Despite their wealth, by the end of 2019, the relationship between Philip and Pauline was strained. Pauline indicated that she felt like a spectator rather than a participant in the marriage. Now moving to the timeline of the incident. On April 5, 2021, at 8:07 a.m., Philip Polkinghorne called 111, which is the emergency services number in New Zealand. He told the operator that he had found his wife dead. Here is what the police found during the course of their investigation. Pauline's body was in the foyer of the house. It appeared as though she had died by hanging, but the police thought there was more to this than meets the eye. For example, there was a piece of orange nylon rope tied to the staircase handrail and another piece on the floor. The knots of the rope had not been pulled to the bottom of the handrail by Pauline's weight, as would be expected. When the police gently pulled on the rope, the knots quickly unraveled. The police wondered how the rope held Pauline's weight if the knots were not tight. Philip said that on April 4, Easter Sunday, the couple stopped by the suburb of Highland Park before having lunch and returning home. Pauline cooked dinner, which was out of the ordinary for her. They then watched the Netflix show New Amsterdam and went to bed at about 10 p.m. They slept in separate bedrooms this night, as usual. The next morning, Monday, April 5, Philip discovered Pauline dead. He cut her down after being instructed to do so by the emergency services operator. Philip said that his wife had been experiencing symptoms of depression. Her mother had died 6 weeks earlier, and she was greatly affected by this loss. Philip was taken to the Auckland Central Police Station and interviewed for 4 hours. He was friendly and talkative. Philip's delivery was fast-paced. His thoughts appeared to be scattered, and at times he was a little erratic. In addition to repeating the story about finding his wife, Philip supplied a long list of grievances he had with her. For example, Pauline interrupted him while he was watching his television shows. She drank too much alcohol. She left the windows open in the winter, yet used an electric blanket. She was paranoid about mosquito bites, ignored his advice about not using her work phone for personal calls, bragged about her academic achievements, and she overused pillows on beds and couches. Perhaps Philip thought these complaints would really resonate with the police, like they would scream, "She overused pillows. What a monster." While searching Philip's house, the police found a belt which contained a pattern consistent with marks found on Pauline's neck. They also found 37 grams of methamphetamine throughout the house and a pipe under Philip's bed. An autopsy revealed that Pauline had cuts on her face, bruises on her arm, and abrasions on her nose and back. There was alcohol in her system, as well as the sedative zopiclone. Her cause of death was strangulation. The police discovered that Philip, the eye surgeon, had a wandering eye. He had been engaging in extramarital activity for several years and had transferred almost $300,000 to 6 women, 3 of whom were identified as sex workers. $106,000 of this money had been transferred to an Australian sex worker named Madison Ashton. $440,000 in cash had been withdrawn, including almost $200,000 from cash machines in Australia. This makes it seem like Madison was making at least some of these withdrawals. Messages between Philip and Madison revealed that the couple had plans for a long-term romance. For example, 18 days after Pauline died, Philip wrote, quote, "Darling, you and I aren't going anywhere. We are going to last 100 years, unquote. On the night of April 4, the day before Pauline died, Philip's cell phone went into sleep mode at 11:16 p.m. It unlocked at 1:10 a.m., now on April 5. At 1:11 a.m., the phone was put into airplane mode. Philip had only done this one other time during the last year. The private messaging service WhatsApp was accessed. The police were unable to retrieve any messages that may have been sent using that app. There was no activity on the phone from 2:44 a.m. until 6:46 a.m. After this, Philip accessed photo and video apps until 8:05 a.m., 2 minutes before he called 111. Pauline's phone became inactive at 10:47 p.m. on April 4. At 4:04 a.m., Pauline used her phone to draft 2 messages which were never sent. One was to Philip, and the other was to the teenage daughter of a friend. Pauline and this teenager had become close after Pauline's mother died. Later, the Crown disputed this finding about the phone, arguing that it was due to automatic processes, not because of Pauline's actions. The police came to believe that Philip had murdered Pauline and staged the scene as if she had brought an end to her own life. As the investigation continued, Philip was charged with possession of methamphetamine and pleaded guilty. He denied having anything to do with his wife's death. On August 16, 2022, about 16 months after Pauline Hanna died, Philip Polkinghorne was charged with her murder. On July 29, 2024, his trial started. On September 23, 2024, Philip Polkinghorne was found not guilty of murder. Now moving to my analysis. Philip Polkinghorne maintains his innocence and was found not guilty by a jury. His attorney argued that Pauline was the person responsible for her death. The Crown, of course, disagreed. Despite the verdict, they believed that Philip murdered Pauline. This brings me to the question, was Philip guilty of murder? Let's take a look at the evidence both for and against the idea that he was guilty, starting with the inculpatory factors. Philip had a history of using methamphetamine. This, of course, is illegal. He had spent years engaging in extramarital affairs and spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on sex workers. He appeared to have long-term plans with one of those service providers. Pauline knew about the sex, but she did not want Philip to have an actual romance with anyone else. She believed that he had found a girlfriend, and she was not happy about it. In 2019, Pauline referred to Philip as arrogant, unfaithful, an angry man, and a sex fiend. During a conversation in January 2020, Pauline told 2 of her friends that Philip had attempted to strangle her. In August 2020, she explored the idea of hiring a divorce attorney. In the hours leading up to Pauline's death, Philip had suspicious activity on his phone, including the use of airplane mode. The scene at the house was suspicious. The nylon rope was not secured very well to the handrail. The knots had not slid to the bottom of the handrail as expected, and the rope was too long. A sheet from Pauline's bed in the guest bedroom was missing. It was found in a dryer and slightly damp. There was no forced entry into the house, and Philip even stated there was no intruder. Either he was responsible or Pauline was responsible. A fresh and bloody abrasion was observed on Philip's forehead right after Pauline's death. After his interview with the police, Philip searched the internet for how to delete iCloud storage. The next day, he went to a website which allows untraceable searches. Philip made the mistake of searching on the website instead of using the app. Therefore, his activity was recorded. He searched for the term leg edema after strangulation. Edema is the swelling of a body part. It is most common in legs and feet. Moving to the exculpatory factors. In the early 1990s, Pauline attempted to bring harm to herself after her father died. She had been on antidepressants for 20 years at the time of her death. In addition to feelings of depression, Pauline had a high level of anxiety and a low level of self-esteem. Pauline was addicted to alcohol. She would drink up to a full bottle of wine every night. She desperately tried to beat this addiction, which included taking medication to reduce or eliminate her consumption. It was not unusual for Pauline to black out while drinking. Pauline also heavily used sedatives. Mixing alcohol with sedatives is a recipe for disaster. In March of 2019, Pauline stored a draft of a letter to Philip on her computer. She indicated that her father's death was devastating and she would cry herself to sleep. In April 2020, the year before Pauline died, she sent an email to herself about how she was never good enough and desperate to ask for help. She wrote that she had negative thoughts and didn't know what she was going to do with herself. Pauline recognized that Philip had an extraordinary sexual appetite and needed to have sex every day. She had even participated in group sex years earlier to appease him and accepted that sex workers were part of his life. Pauline defended Philip to family members, saying that he was a very complex character. Philip did not have a strong motive to kill his wife. She already knew some of what he was up to. In Philip's house, the police did note that the knots in the rope were loose, but Philip claimed he had already untied some of the knots. The knots observed by the police were not those used in the hanging. Furthermore, Philip had cut the rope, which could have made the knots loose. Philip did have a small abrasion on his forehead, but his blood was found on the side of the staircase. He may have hit his head after finding his wife dead. 4 pathologists testified at Philip's trial. They said that the minor injuries Pauline sustained were probably not connected to an attack. Combined, the pathologist could only recall 2 instances where a fatal strangulation left no injuries. Pauline was familiar with the orange nylon rope. She had used it the day before to take trash to a garbage dump. When considering the evidence in this case, do I think that Philip Polkinghorne was guilty of murder? In my opinion, he was probably guilty in reality, but not guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. The jury made the right decision. The problem the Crown had with the physical evidence is that it did not overwhelmingly point to murder. The state of the rope and the damp bedsheet did not look good for Philip, but the condition of Pauline's body supported his argument. There was no smoking gun. As far as the mental health factors which were prominently featured in the trial, there was powerful evidence in favor of both sides. Philip was using methamphetamine, cheating, and may have had plans to run off with one of the sex workers. His life appeared to be out of control, and he was spending hundreds of thousands of dollars. At the same time, Pauline had her share of difficulties. She was chronically depressed and anxious, consuming excessive quantities of alcohol, misusing sedatives, overwhelmed at work, unhappy with her marriage, grieving the loss of her mother, and having many negative thoughts. Even though I believe Philip was probably guilty, he very well could be innocent. There is no way to rule out that Pauline took drastic action, which led to her death. Now moving to my final thoughts. One could argue that even if Philip did not physically kill his wife, he was morally responsible for her death. His reckless lifestyle was inconsistent with a good marriage and took a toll on Pauline. Considering how Philip moved on romantically after Pauline's death, in the blink of an eye, he probably did not cry his eyes out. Regardless of the verdict, any woman who desires to be with him needs to have eyes in the back of her head. She may have trouble sleeping at night, wondering if Philip will be plotting her demise, but should address this insomnia without involving the overuse of pillows. Those are my thoughts in the case of Philip Polkinghorne. Please put any opinions and thoughts in the comments section. They consistently generate an interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found my analysis of this topic to be informative. Thanks for watching.